Welcome to Gen Z Hoops, the Gen Z basketball, coaching, and sports business show.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Gen Z Hoops podcast. Today, I'm joined by General Manager at Sports Business Classroom, an NBA national writer at Bleacher Report, and salary cap strategist, Eric Pincus. Eric, how are you doing today, sir?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. Before we get into your career and your journey to becoming the general manager at Sports Business Classroom, can you start off our little conversation here about talking about your connection to the game of basketball?
Well, that's a good question. I was never going to be a player. My wingspan is terrible. But I love the game. I grew up a baseball fan, and I played football, I played baseball, I played different sports, and I love basketball. I understood it better than my body could execute it. So it is what it is. How do you get involved in something that you're not going to actively do yourself? And along the way, I would go to games. I live in LA. I grew up here, so would go to Lakers, go to Clippers, over at the sports arena, which is gone. And at the sports arena, they would have 10-game packages where you could see, the road. You really were buying the road team because Clippers were pretty awful. And so I'd see like Olajuwon, I'd see
Wow.
Jordan, the Lakers a couple of times, and then like 2 times a year you get the 2 Laker road games at Clippers, and then you'd get Barkley never played with the Suns. Every time I did those 10-game packages for a few years, he would always be in street clothes. So if you hear him talking about how like load management is BS, like, dude, you never played those Clipper games. But at some point I realized like I'm paying to go to games, and there are jobs where they pay you to go to games. So I had another career. I was doing other things, and I sort of did this as like a side project to just, hey, it exists. I started writing in the early days of the internet and found some people were responding to what I was writing, and managed to find a way to get in and cover the game in person, get paid to be there. And if I'm going to be there, yeah, my motivation is I love the game. I grew up watching Celtics Lakers when I was a kid, in the Larry Bird Magic days when I was pretty young. Obviously was around for the whole Jordan era of the 90s and all of that, and the Shaq Kobe era in LA. And so, yeah, I wanted to be there, wanted to learn more about it, and found a way to get paid to do it. And then, like I said, if I'm there and I'm doing that, just my personality, I'm going to want to be good at it. Just, I want to be excellent at what I do. For whatever reason, I just am motivated to learn as much as I can and grow with it. So ended up building what became a primary career, and now it's basically what I do full time. I still can't shoot a ball very well. My kids were much better basketball players. All my daughters much better than I ever was. But I am in the game in some form, so I appreciate that.
Wow, that's amazing. Growing up in LA, did you ever get annoyed with the whole distinction of whether it's a Laker town or a Clipper town?
I mean, it's very much a Laker town, and the Clippers pretty much acknowledge that and understand like they're sort of the alternate choice. There are a lot of people in LA who are not from LA. I was born in New York and moved out here like before second grade. So I've been out here forever. But if you're like from Boston and you move to LA, you can't be a Laker fan, right?
No, I can't. The rivalry.
If you're from New York,
is strong.
Chicago, anywhere, and we have in LA, it's just everyone's from everywhere. We have Angelinos who are native and born here. Many people come here, and then also there are people who just are counterculture. Like everybody loves the Lakers. I don't want to love what everybody else loves. I'm going to love the Clippers, and I respect that as well, right? Like everyone has their journey to whatever it is that they like. I don't judge any of that. In LA, it's always sort of been a Laker town. The Clippers have been better for some time, outside of obviously the Lakers got that one ring recently, somewhat recently. But they're even when the Lakers were at their bottom when Kobe tore his Achilles and was basically out a year, and they were rebuilding and they were going through the lottery and were terrible for several years. And the Clippers at that time had Blake and Chris and DJ and all the Lob City, right? And then eventually moved on to like that CP and then eventually Kawhi and, all that.
Yeah.
Through that run, they sold out more than the Lakers did in terms of the arena itself.
Right.
There were some stretches where the Lakers just weren't selling out. They were terrible, and the Clippers were at a peak. But still, I would write on the Lakers being awful with Bleacher Report, or I guess going back further, my previous publications with the LA Times. I was with HoopsWorld and Basketball Insiders,
Yep.
and I would write on the Lakers being awful, and I would get 10 times the viewership of writing on I don't know, that's an estimate. That's not a factual number, but an estimate of like, if you're going to get, 10,000 views on a Clipper article, you're going to get 100,000 on the Lakers, or maybe at the peak, maybe that dropped to 8, right? So maybe like at the absolute worst of the Lakers and the absolute best of the Clippers, maybe it was 80,000 Lakers to 10,000, Clipper. These are made up numbers, but it's an idea of just not just locally, but nationally. I mean, the interest has never been there on the same level with the Clippers. And, I think for them that to change, they need to win a title.
Right.
We'll see what happens. Yeah, this was their best chance, in my opinion, out of all the years that they had. But then Kawhi got hurt, which is what you say on day one or before the start of the season. It's like, yeah, they could be something if they are healthy, if Kawhi's healthy, if Paul's healthy. Right. And it's just, maybe it's Lamar Odom. What was it? Was it Blake stepped on Lamar Odom's ankle or something like that? And that's what led to Blake spraining his ankle. Chris Paul breaking a hand or a hamstring.
Yep.
Yeah, like it just always seemed to happen. And it's unfortunate, for the organization, but and for the fans, but that's just sort of the reality.
We even saw it that one year and when they were in the play-in tournament. I remember Kawhi was hurt, then Paul George went down with COVID and they didn't even make the playoffs that one year. That was awful, I remember. I mean, I'm from New York right here, so it's like you could say it's like a New York Knicks town. But I remember there was that stretch when Brooklyn Nets had Kyrie, Harden, and Durant, and like they would always have there was like this huge rivalry between the boroughs here. I have a lot of Knicks fans and the Nets fans who are like kind of like rebellious against like the whole New York Knicks thing. But so it kind of gave the Nets fans like a little bit of a voice, but it still remained a Knicks town. But sorry about that little.
No, it's a fair comparison. It's a fair comparison. It really is. I mean, like the Nets are a great organization.
Right.
They've had some success. I don't know if like the Knicks, they haven't had the same success, and the Knicks haven't had a tremendous amount of success over the last, it's been a while since they've won a title, but they're still, this was a great year for them. And obviously being from New York originally, there's a lot of family. My East Coast family loves the Knicks, so I'm always, pulling for them. But love for the Nets, and it's a Knicks town, it's a Lakers town, and I root for the underdog. My main thing is I root for health, I root for success, I root for competition. Like I didn't want to sweep. It's not, Boston can go to the finals, but like I'd rather it be a 6-game series where they go to the finals, or a 7-game series. With Halliburton not playing, that was kind of took the wind out of the sail. So I root for health. Same with the Nets, the Clippers. I root for them to be successful. I'm generally a positive guy when it comes to like rooting. And then I root for people that I've helped or gotten to know along the way. And Makar Gavorkian is a SBC alum. He took our virtual session during the pandemic, and now he's running their cap department in Brooklyn. And so I root for his success, right? Like Buddy Scott took our program and he's with the Celtics. So I root for his success. And so, yeah, I'm in LA. I know Mike Zarin. He's been a friend of the program for several years. So I root for his success. And it's hard when you grow up in LA and you're sort of coded to hate the Celtics. And then, you want people to succeed. So I've gotten past the fan brain side of all of that, which is something that we teach, something that will hit as you go through the program. We want to make sure that if you want to work in the industry, you have to be able to put aside your irrationalities, which tend to be fans. And I'm not crapping on fans who are watching this at all. Like, I love the passion, the joy, like love your team, love them to death, like be crazy about your team and don't lose that passion. But when you start to want to work in the industry, you have to say, okay, well, if I'm from LA and the Celtics want to hire me, am I going to say no because I grew up hating the Celtics? That's ridiculous. Like,
Right.
you need to go and get where the opportunity is. You need to like do everything you can to want the Celtics to beat the Lakers at that point, right?
Right.
And that's the reality. If you want to get into this industry and want to be an objective professional, which not everyone does. And if you go into media, so you can have opinions and talking points. And some people are branded, like Bill Simmons is a notable Celtics fan, and
Yep.
that's okay as long as you're upfront about it. I tend to just be a little bit more, from my LA Times background, a little more journalistic about it in terms
Right.
of like, no, like I'm an observer, I'm a conduit to the fan. What's going on? What is the information that they need to know that maybe they're not getting?
Keep it
And my
factual.
biases, yeah, well, I mean, factual, because some what I'm doing for Bleacher is like anticipatory, where I'm
Oh,
trying to predict where player movement, how player movement will happen, like who will go where,
right.
what are the issues. Like, we need to know what the Cavs are going to do with Donovan Mitchell, and Donovan Mitchell's going to do with the Cavs, and
Yep.
then that will have a ripple effect on what happens with Darius Garland.
Right.
Now, it's possible that they keep both. It's possible they lose one or the other, probably via trade. And
Yes.
so my job is to analyze that, anticipate, and then talk to people, because I've been lucky and fortunate, although we certainly made some of my own luck, but fortunate to be in a position where I can talk to people with teams and in the industry, agents and people who might know things, or at least can lead me in the right direction of intel, so I can at least give an educated point of view, and maybe share something that a fan won't know because they're not in a position to know. So that's really like, there's no point to me having a fan bias, when I'm trying to do that, because that just takes away from my ability to do my job. So that's why we try to get rid of fan brain as best as we can. Again, but don't lose the joy and the passion
Right.
for it. And I haven't lost my like fandom of the game itself, my fandom of the NBA as a league and what it's accomplishing. I have to criticize the NBA itself
Yep.
when it's appropriate. So it's not like a blind fandom of the league. It's just of the sport, of the general, whatever we want to call the NBA as a whole, not the company NBA, but the embodiment of what it is. That I'm a fan of. I do appreciate the NBA and for what it is. Flaws and positives. I'm mostly positives, but certainly flaws as well. So I um, try to be as objective as is possible. There's no one who's 100% perfectly objective, but I do the best I can within that.
Yeah, most definitely. My mentor John Harder Phillips, he actually told me this many times about like having a fan brain, because like he's known me since I was in like, let's say like eighth grade, and I'm like a huge Miami Heat fan, so I'll be like, oh my God, like when
Wait,
Jimmy
you're a
Butler.
Heat fan in New York?
Yeah, my mom's like a huge Dwayne Wade fan, and her sister,
Okay.
huge Dwayne Wade fan. I know I gotta add him to the wall up here with
So you have like a dual citizenship sort of thing where you're a Heat and Knicks fan, or
Oh no,
is it just,
I'm not a Knicks
oh,
fan, if anything.
ooh,
Yeah,
oh,
I'm like
wow.
kind of rebellious in that
Okay,
sense.
well, like I said, like if you're in LA, you're counterculture, you're a Clipper fan.
Yeah.
Normally, the New York counterculture might be the Nets, but hey, if it's Miami, all good, all
And
good. Either fun.
I used to talk to John all the time about what do you call it? Like, oh my God, we're winning the championship. Like I was like making fun of him when like he's a big Knicks fan and a Bucks fan too, because like Giannis and his Greek heritage as well. So like I was like making fun of him last year when the Heat and Jimmy Butler, they won that huge run, beat the Knicks and the Bucks. He's like,
Yeah,
Ash, you realize I'm not a Bucks fan, I'm not a Knicks fan. Like, yeah, I like those teams, but I'm a NBA fan now. I work for the NBA. I support every team. So now that you say that, that kind of like triggered that in my memory a little bit. To like
yeah.
it makes
It's
put it into
it's
perspective.
yeah. I mean, if you work for the NBA, I mean, I have some friends in the NBA, and they don't like discourage people to have like their allegiances, but when it comes to being a professional,
Yeah, of course.
like you have to put that aside. And so with students that I work with, I try to like get them used to stop saying we when they're talking about their team, or like, and
Yeah.
don't hide joy, like if you celebrate, like whatever, but like especially when you're communicating with others that you might work with in the future, it's just keep yourself like an everyman here. Like, I'm for everybody,
Yep.
don't want to lose an opportunity because of things that don't really matter. Like, yeah, it matters to you, but like it doesn't matter. No, not everyone needs to know that. But look, if you want to wear a Knicks or a Heat Heat shirt every day and you know do all that, like fine, it's a choice. But you just also have to know that like that might turn off like
Yeah.
29 other opportunities, right? So
Yeah, of course.
yeah, for sure.
So your first job covering the NBA, as you mentioned before, was for HoopsWorld, where you were a senior NBA writer. What was your experience like with this position? And can you talk about the best aspects and the biggest challenges over the course of 12 years that you held the position for?
So like Hoops World was like in the very early days of the internet where there was no Facebook, Twitter. Um, there wasn't, I don't know if Hoops Hype existed yet. Uh, it was uh, really just an opportunity that came up because, like, just randomly, like, I had started writing on message board. I would write something and then I would post it on a message board. There wasn't really a blog yet. There wasn't a place like I didn't have a website because people didn't easily have websites yet. You could get a website, you could build one, but it was in the very early days where it wasn't really like a common thing yet. And so I had wanted to do this and was looking at it and just randomly like a friend of my wife who like just someone she grew up with was he's in Jersey, actually New Jersey, and he's like, hey, there's a website based in Tampa that's looking for a Lakers writer in LA. And I'm like, I don't even know how he found that out because there wasn't like it was hard to communication and things like that we take for granted now how easy it is to see everything that's going on. You go to a job listing on whatever job sites, Google, whatever, it's easy to find. Back then, it didn't really, there wasn't the infrastructure yet. But for whatever reason, he saw that, he sent it to me. I wrote them a brief story of like, I guess this was after the Lakers had repeated. And I think it was the year where I was basically saying why, 5 reasons why they would win again and 5 reasons why they wouldn't win. And it was just a nice little balanced article. And they said, yeah, sure, cool. And there was no real money yet. It was like, was I hired? Hired is kind of subjective. If they're not paying, am I hired? Right. At that point, it was not really, there was no money in it yet. And so what they did have is they had connections. And so this was Steve Kyler out of Tampa, had relationship built with Orlando and had done enough to get credentialed there and was building out different whatever markets with other writers that he was finding. Bill Ingram was in Houston as the Rocket guy, and so he got Bill credentialed. And now over that time, before I don't know how many years, a few years before I got there, 2-3 years, whatever, they had built a relationship up with the Clippers, not the Lakers, or they kind of started with the Lakers, but the Lakers didn't really know who we were yet. And the Clippers, they had met a few people there over the course of time and were able to get me a credential to go to the game. So my job, the compensation was really, I got a access to go to games. And so then from there, it was just my first year, all I did was follow around Art Thompson III of the OC Register. He's no longer doing this industry, but great guy. I don't even know if he knew I was following him around. But he was the beat reporter. There were LA Times guys, there were other guys, but he was the one I seemed to follow the most and like observed what he was doing. I didn't ask a lot of questions. I was sort of in the group and I was in the office when Mike Dunleavy would do the interviews and eventually start to ask questions. And over time, by a year, now it's like, okay, I've done this. I have a feel for it. Then I started to assert my personality a little bit more, not aggressively, not disrespectfully, but yeah, now I'm going to start to get more involved, ask more questions. Right. And over time, I would go to the Laker road games and at the Clippers, and I got to know John Black, who was their person at the time who ran their media, their PR rather. And so, okay, I'm a human. I exist. I'm a reasonable guy. I'm professional. I'm not doing this as a joke. If I write about your team and criticize you, it's done with respect. It's not done out of hate or whatever or nonsense. It's not fan brain type stuff. It's just like, hey, I'm covering the NBA, and so over time, the Lakers let me in, and then I started to build up relationships with Lakers and other teams and other media and agents and all of that. And that sort of opened the pathway. And over time, Hoops World started to pay a little bit. It partnered with some other organizations. There was some funding. It was never a livable wage, but it was, it neared that at times, like a livable wage, but it was a secondary thing. And then I had an opportunity to get, this was actually like over a 2-year period, an opportunity with the LA Times where they had an opening on their blogs, which at the time, the LA Times was transitioning from, they're still struggling to transition from the print medium to the world where people aren't relying on newspapers. And it was a very challenging time for them, but they were trying to figure out how to join the internet market. And so they had blogs, but the blogs weren't even run by the sports department. They were run by the blog department. I interviewed with them. They loved me, wanted to hire me, but the sports department had just laid someone off, and California law means you're obligated to offer a new position to someone you laid off first. And they took the position, didn't get the position, and that person they ended up leaving for a different job 2 years later. That opened up the opportunity, which led to the LA Times. So I give that example to say how there was a lot of years of patience along the way, and a lot of development, a lot of years of working for basically no money or little money. That was a side job. And I wasn't young, like fresh out of college. I was actually a little bit older in terms of this industry as far as getting my start, closer to about 30. So I started late, and this was something that some people will say, oh, if you don't start at 18 and you're already like doing this, or you didn't go to journalism school, or 20, you're 24 and you're not doing this, it's already too late for you. It's all nonsense. Now, the world has changed, obviously, since I did this in the days of Shaq and Kobe, but there's more opportunity, but at the same time, there's also more competition because everyone has more opportunity. So instead of like there being a few jobs and some applicants, and it's just hard to know where those jobs are, now there's a lot of jobs and there's a zillion applicants, and you have to, distinguish yourself somehow to get that. So people can't necessarily walk the same path I took, but it was a great experience. I had to, I didn't meet my boss, Steve Kyler, for like 4 or 5 years.
Wow.
Of actually working for him. Again, working for him is a loose term. Like the first year, there was nothing. And then I forget what it was. At some point, it was like, we started doing stuff for, I wrote for Chauncey Billups' site. He had done a partnership where players were starting their own websites because everyone was trying to figure out the internet. And so like I wrote for Al Harrington's website. I wrote for Chauncey Billups, bunch of others. And Chauncey and I are still cool. Like we don't hang, but when we see each other, it's good to see each other. And like I would get a little bit extra time with him and say, hey, I'm writing this for your site. Can you just answer me some stuff? And so eventually Hoops World it was purchased sort of by, I guess, Gannett, who owns USA Today. And then eventually there was a little bit more money, but then it sort of, USA Today pivoted, Hoops World went away, and that birthed Basketball Insiders, which was basically the same people doing the same thing we've always done, just now separate from USA Today, had to be rebranded. And so I stayed with Basketball Insiders for a long period of time, only around pandemic time, I forget the exact year, that stopped. And Steve Kyler moved out from the business, is doing other things. He sold Basketball Insiders to a gambling company overseas, and that didn't jibe with what I'm trying to do. And so I went a different direction. And then at some point, just to kind of merge it all together, I did get that job with the LA Times, and that took a lot of work. And that 2-year gap, I became I had already been friends with the assistant editor, but our friendship grew because they had known I'd interviewed, and we just stayed really close and in touch. And then Mike Bresnahan, who does Spectrum TV, he was with the LA Times. He was the beat reporter. He fought for me because he knew the quality of my work. I didn't even know he was a fan of my work because he was very later I learned we're the LA Times. We need to be the lead on the news for the Lakers. And the more you interact with other organizations, you have to be careful that you're not giving away your intel and your,
Yep.
and so he fought for me. I didn't know that he was a fan even. He was always cordial, but, and I got the position, was there for several years, 4 or 5 years. And then again, they were dealing with some money issues and trying to figure out their place in this world. And they ended up giving up on the blogs altogether, which is why I was what I was hired for. And so with the elimination of the blogs, I was a free agent and I got an opportunity to go to Bleacher and just been there ever since, knock on wood. And along the way, picked up in 2016, started working with sports business classrooms. So that's kind of like how it all started for me. But I mean, I did NBA TV. That kind of died at the pandemic. I work with the MBPA indirectly. Directly, indirectly, I'm not an employee of the MBP. I guess I'm wearing my shirt today. But I do some training for their potential agents to help them pass the agents exam. Obviously, I'm the general manager of Sports Business Classroom, which is my first year in that title. It's sort of been just a road of, doing what I like to do, finding ways to get paid to do it, which isn't that different from what we started the story was. I like basketball. I want to be a part of it. I can't play it. How can I find a way to do it, be a part of it, and then also get paid to be there instead of paying to be there? And I don't have a set, my original career, I stopped that pre-pandemic, about a year before the pandemic, give or take, to pursue this full time. And, I'm still standing. So it's a volatile industry. I don't like to take anything for granted, but, I get to mostly do what I like. Like anything else, there's some challenges. There are times you have to travel, or I have to write when I'm tired, but I get pretty when March hit, Lakers had a very road heavy, like February, December, and I think February. And so March, they played like every other day at Staples Center, or sorry, crypto.com. And the Clippers had games. And so like it got to a point where we're like, man, this schedule's brutal. And we're like looking at the schedule and other people in the industry, and we're like complaining about, and then I'm like, hold on, like, what are we talking about? Like, I'm sitting in like the second or third row of the media seating right off of courtside. It's not courtside, but it's the rows right behind the aisle.
Yep.
And I'm going to all these games. Like, I don't, if you hear me complaining about, oh, I have to go to too many Laker games or whatever, and sit these great seats, not pay any money to do it, then get to go post game and listen to like what the coach and LeBron thought about the game or whatever. Like, come on, what are we talking about here? So, there's challenges like in anything else. You have to deal with difficult situations at times, difficult people at times, like any job. But I am doing something that I enjoy doing, which makes it easier to, I guess, trudge through. Sometimes that I'll work crazy hours, or I don't get a lot of sleep because I do work for more than one boss. So yeah, it's I don't mind doing it because I enjoy doing it. So it makes it easier to do that.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, I didn't mean to just start off and only talk about HoopsWorld, where you did a great job. You ended up winning 2 PBWA Professional Basketball Writers Association awards for pieces written for the HoopsWorld's companion publication, which is Swish Magazine. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a long time ago. I missed that. PBWA, for those who don't know, is the Professional Basketball Writers Association. I'm still a member of that group, and they basically advocate for journalists covering the NBA, and they have the ear of the NBA, and they fight for us when just to make sure we still have access to the locker rooms and things like that. So they do great work, and they do have a writing contest every year. Unfortunately, my content has really shifted away from quote-driven and story-based, like humanized stories of like, about people. And those are a little bit more where they give awards for mine is more team building and analysis. And it's a little bit less like if you know what I do, it may be good or great or whatever you think of my stuff. I don't know. But I do miss some of that, but one of my award-winning pieces was like chasing Rasheed Wallace down and trying to get him to commit to a conversation, and how hard he fought to not talk to me. And it was fun. It was like I did, challenge a little bit. I think the other one was, I think, on Stacey Ogman, who was called Plastic Man, UNLV player. The time was with the Orlando Magic, and I think he threw some lotion at another player on his team in the locker room and had a team suspension for a few days. And then this was his first game back. And so I was in the locker room, like, he didn't want to talk. He refused to talk. Then when I tried to follow up, he got like threatening to me, which was probably the only time I've ever been threatened on some level before. I mean, most players are, and look, Stacey, I'm not maligning him as a human. I'm sure it was a tough situation, so I don't even hold any grudges to Stacey, but it was a difficult moment. And I wrote on that moment and sort of tried to shed light on maybe why he reacted that way, and then make it more, instead of being, oh, this guy is an a-hole for being a jerk to me. Okay, well, why is he being this way?
There's a reason for everything.
And so I tried to humanize that and try to understand that. And yeah, I got some accolade for that. And then I haven't, most of what I like, if I write, my last piece for Bleacher was like breaking down the D'Angelo Russell contract situation.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for those who are interested in that stuff, it's very helpful. Is it something that I submit for an award? It's not that kind of content. So but it is cool to win an award. Have some plaque somewhere too, a couple of them, somewhere probably in the garage in a box or something like that. But it's kind of nice to be awarded for that. But that's never really what I did this for, was any sort of award, or like they put me on NBA TV. I never aspired to be a TV personality or to do that sort of thing. If someone wants to put me on TV, sure, I'll talk, and it pays pretty well to be on TV. So if you want to do that, yes, I have bills to pay. Happy to do so. But more of just the love of the game and really doing more what I do behind the scenes is a little bit more my thing. But if you want to put me in front of a camera, like, I guess I'm in front of a camera now, but you see, like,
yep.
I don't mind doing it. It's just, and one of our majors at SBC is media and broadcast, and there are people who actively want to do that. I don't teach those because I do have a media experience and I can contribute to that. But we have like Jay Adonde, who's going into the Hall of Fame. He'll be named into the Basketball Hall of Fame. He's already named, but I don't know how that works officially. I guess they delayed the ceremony, but they're going to do it soon this year. And then Howard Beck, who should be in the Hall of Fame eventually, who's a legend in this industry, and Katie Heindel, CP the franchise. If you're a New York Knicks fan, you may know him, who built out his own brand from scratch. And he's been great. He's my first time working with him, and it's been great. So
he's coming on the show next week.
Have that media. Oh, cool. Excellent. Yeah. If you're into media, like if you want to be that TV personality, we got you. I'll teach you the salary cap, the nerdy stuff, whatever. If you want to do the media, let me know. I'm talking to your listeners and whatnot. I know you're in the program, but if you're looking, we have a handful of spots left, probably 6 or 7. It would be generous. We're pretty darn close. It just depends on the last bit of people who've registered, if they finish their registration, but we don't have a lot of spots left. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, just reach out.
Most definitely. So as you mentioned before, you did a lot of work for Basketball Insiders and NBA TV but you did it as a capologist, not just a sports writer. Can you explain like what capology is and explain like how you became interested in it?
I mean, I think it's a made up word. I don't know if I made it up or someone else made it up. I don't know. At some point, like, I was doing a radio show, and they called me the capologist for the people, because I don't work for a team. I think I had that on my. I don't know where the term came from, and I don't know if I made it up or not. But another word would be like salary cap strategist is probably the more descriptive term. And so along the way, I got to know Larry Kuhn really well, who wrote the CBA FAQ, which has been really like the Bible or the Cliff Notes of how the league works, and was fortunate enough to get enough context to maybe get a little bit more intel on trades and the mechanics of how they executed and player contracts. And so just being somebody who's relatively good with numbers and accounting and math, that's sort of some of my career background. pre-NBA stuff. I just started tracking and publishing salaries and analyzing how the NBA itself operates and realized, especially at that time, most people didn't know anything about it. And I would hear radio people on the show, like the host would be talking about Lakers should do this. And I'm like, dude, that's not even legal. Or some of this, like the Suns should, the Suns are targeting LeBron type stuff. I'm like, dude, like how? Okay. Like if it's not legal, okay.
Insane.
Like the minimum LeBron coming to Phoenix for the minimum because you draft his son. I looked at it and like maybe there's another way, but like the only way that I saw just in 5 minutes of looking at it would be as if they traded LeBron for KD if LeBron opted in, and they would have to do it before July because the Suns literally can't do KD for LeBron in July because if LeBron opts in, his salary is more, and where they are with the rules, they can't take in more than what they send out. They can't even take $1 more. Whereas LeBron right now makes a little bit more than KD. So it is technically legal, right? So at the draft, LeBron says, okay, you drafted my son, I'll opt in. KD's now a Laker. Is that happening? No. I mean, is it possible because it's legal? Of course. So my job is to at least discern what is legal and what is possible. I try not to be judgmental when someone asks me, like one of those hosts say, okay, is it possible? Can I have this conversation on the radio? Or if you're an internet personality, YouTube, whatever, or you're writing on this, I have a lot of journalists fellow media who will reach out to me for advice. And my general philosophy, right or wrong, has been to be generous with information and to say yes to people asking me questions, like answer the questions. It's served me well. It's not for everyone. And maybe you could say I should have monetized certain relationships or said no to people unless they pay me, or not do radio shows unless they pay. We could debate that. I would argue that where I've gotten holistically over all the things I do has justified how I approach it, but there's no answer. I can only approach it the way that I have approached it, and I can't change the way that I previously approached it. So for me, if someone reaches out and they want advice, I'm going to give it to them. Now there gets to a point where, like, if an agent reaches out and I have a conversation and now it's like, okay, they need help. Now it's like, okay, I need a retainer and we need to have a business relationship where I'm advising you. Or if there's someone with a team, it's a little stickier because of that. But, there's a line where you have to set boundaries of, like, because people will want to use what you have for free and not pay for it in this industry. And that's very common. And people can get taken advantage of because there's so much supply demand issue where there's more supply of people who want to help than there's the demand for it. And so people will try to, but for me, I try to educate the fans of the game to be better fans, not better fans from like a arrogant point of view.
Right.
Of saying like, oh, you shouldn't be rooting for this, or whatever. I'm not calling anyone ignorant or anything. I'm saying these rules are legit complex. It takes a lot of work to really understand them. And I have been fortunate enough to get the access to people who can answer questions that I have when I don't understand something, because it is so complex. And I can catch them when they get it wrong, because they do, even the NBA itself or the NBPA, although they're both usually almost, nearly 100% of the time accurate. Every so often I'll be like, hey, this was a little bit off. And they're like, oh crap, I didn't even see that. Very rare. But like, the point is that no one's infallible. People might say I'm an expert. I try to downplay that, because while I may know maybe more than some, there's a lot I don't know. And just because you just can't, it's unknowable in its entirety. Not to mention that, like, the NBA and the NBPA can agree to change the rules at any point together if they both agree. So anything I say is 100% illegal. If the NBA changes the rule with the NBPA's blessing, it changes. So there is no, like, it does provide opportunity for someone like me and for students who want to pursue this side of the coin, because you have teams who need help. It used to be that maybe they didn't even used to have cap people. Then they would have one. Some teams have like one, and then they may have like 2 or 3 support. Some teams don't have any still. Some teams have one. There are some teams that are behind. Some teams have a huge department. But even so, if you have 30 teams, and let's say it's an average of 3 a team, let's just round it up to 100 people. Maybe there's only 100 jobs in that with a team, but there's also the NBA itself. They hire people who do this sort of thing. There's the MBPA, there's the agents. There's maybe 8 to 10 top agencies, and then there's 800 other agents, give or take, that are have 0 to 1 client, maybe 3 clients, and they don't have the same budgets. But then if you're just getting started out, you may not need the same budget. You just need somebody to believe in you, invest in you a small amount to get you started, and you can help advise them with that. So there, I try to teach people how the industry works. Some of it are agents. To pass the agents exam, you need to know the salary cap really well. It's a tough test. It's not impossible. It's not, for someone like myself, it may not be that hard, but for someone who's never studied this, like if you're a former player and you want to be an agent, which I've helped 3 in the last 3 years, I've helped 3 players pass the exam. Like they kind of know it, but they don't really know it. And when they come to me, they're like, oh crap, I didn't realize how complicated it was. So my job is to help people understand that. And in SBC, we have a whole major, and our lead instructor is Bobby Marks, who you may have heard of, is very strong. He was the cap guy for the assistant GM for the Nets for a very long time, and is with ESPN, and does all of their cap stuff.
Right.
Woj's right-hand man when it comes to that stuff. And it's my first year working with Bobby. I've known Bobby for longer than I can remember, and he's always been a pleasure to be around, pleasure to just be in the industry as a colleague, but not a direct colleague, an acquaintance colleague. And we've always looked out for each other if we see something in our writing that is like, hey, that's a little bit off. We, don't put each other on blast, like, hey, it's slightly different because he can't get it all right. I can't get it all right, because it's almost impossible to get everything up, 100% right in this. And so Bobby and I are going to be teaching the salary cap. So if you're interested in learning that, are there better people to learn from? I mean, maybe, but at the same time, it's pretty darn cool in my opinion. I mean, if I could learn from Bobby and someone who's, I've been doing this long enough, you're getting, it's pretty incredible. So I'll talk about Bobby anyway. I'm pretty humble about myself, but like the reality is we know our stuff. We're going to help you really learn that. So I don't know if capologist is a word, but the heart of it was every fan of their team wants their team to improve. If you are the Nuggets and you won last year, you're saying, how can we improve? How can we stay at the top? If the Celtics win, or the Mavs, or maybe the Wolves, they're going to be saying, the fans are going to be saying, how can we get better? How can we stay at the top? And so that was my job originally, writing for the Lakers with the Little Clippers, covering it for HoopsWorld. And then LA Times was mostly Lakers, a Little Clippers, etc. Even Bleacher, I started Lakers, and then they made me national over time, national writer. So I cover all 30 teams. But the idea is, how do you improve? And so just like there's a set of rules for a 48-minute game, there's a set of rules on how you build a team over the course of a full calendar year and multiple years. And so I just got interested in that. And that's really where I found an aptitude and found an area where it wasn't something like a former player is going to bring something to the game in analysis that I can't bring. There are other people who haven't played in the game, but have been covering the game and are just great at what they do. People who can view the game live and see things that are happening that I can't quite see yet. Now I can see the same thing if I slow the game down and I watch it on replay a little bit. Okay, this is what they ran, but my eyes don't perceive it at the same quickness as like the best analysts, who are like usually former people who did scouting video for teams and cut up film, and they can just see, okay, they went, this is the, they're running hammer, this Spain pick and roll. This is, I know all the different kinds. I know what a screen is, but like there's like probably 8 or 9 or 10 or 12 different types of screens.
Right.
And I can't call out which name. It doesn't matter. No, like I would say set a screen at the elbow so that this guy, if you're running a horns thing or whatever. So I can name all these terms. I can see it happening. I can describe it. It just takes me a little bit longer to process it because just how my brain works. Whereas the cap stuff, that I just process immediately.
Right.
And so that's my aptitude. And so if that's where you are, and we have the scouting video analytics tier, that's the major. If that's what your drive is, go take that. If you want to learn salary cap, for me, this is what I was good at. And it's how I learned how to better understand the game and how to teach others and how to communicate to the public what I had learned. It's really that same journey of like, I was a fan of the game, wanted to be around it. How do I get around it now that I'm here? What do I want to know? How am I going to take advantage of this opportunity? Finding what I was good at, finding what I was most interested at, finding what I could communicate maybe in a way that others couldn't understand. And to this day, there's still people who rely on me for that explanation of like, hey, let's go to Eric and ask him, like, people like either on TV shows, or I get texts like literally every day from people. And because of my nature and because of my philosophy, I'll answer people as quickly as possible and try to be helpful and pay that information forward. And for me, that's been a formula of success, at least for me so far. It's early in the day.
Wow, that's amazing. So I like to focus more on your position at Sports Business Classroom now. As you stated before, you started off as an instructor. Can you talk a little bit about your experience as an instructor and now the transition from going from an instructor to now the general manager at SBC?
Well, that's a good question because I don't know yet. I can tell you what it's been like so far.
Yep.
Because I haven't, like, what is it that Mike Tyson says? Like, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the mouth or punched in the face. I'm paraphrasing it. My job is to sort of figure out what I don't know about the program as an instructor, because that's what I've always been. And now figure out, like, I do more administrative stuff of the program and I need to organize and take a leadership position. And I've never been a person who sought leadership, but I'm somebody who, when there is a need for leadership, I'm happy to be the leader if that's what the requirement is. So I could be the role player, I could be the leader. It depends on the situation. And so for Larry, who ran the program as the GM since he brought me in 2016, he needed me to do a lot of the salary cap stuff with him because he was being the GM. There were aspects that pulled him away from that. So I had his back and basically could teach the whole salary cap program. But we taught it together. He had somebody who could do it if he needed to step out. And I also built out our mock trade deadline, what we call the practicum, which is something that starts on day one and bleeds all the way through the whole program. It's a running theme of everybody gets broken into teams, and we'll probably have 20 NBA teams represented. We'll have all 30, but the other 10 will probably be alumni, representing teams as sort of NPCs, non-player characters who are there to interact with others, but they're not presenting, they're not being judged, they're just part of the process. And so over the course of the week, they're going to need to identify who they are as a team. These are probably people who don't know each other yet. They're just getting to know each other on day one. They're being placed in teams basically at random. It's not complete random in that I try to blend a proper balance of salary cap and scouts. But as far as who the people are, I only have a vague knowledge of, like, I know who you are. I know who some of the other people are, but like the only thing I know now is I need to take a note. And I'll put it in my notes right now. I take great notes, is that not to put you on the heat, because I just don't want people on their favorite teams, because I want you to think outside of your comfort zone, because fans may spend all day and night every day planning out how their team can get better.
Yeah.
The last thing I want you to do is come in with that and have like your preconceived notions. I want you to represent someone else. So I made a note of it. You won't be on so it's not random, but it's, like, I'm going to put you with whatever. And we'll have, like, our media people have a different role. The people who are in the agent track, and not that it's not our track, that are currently agents or are hoping to be agents. They're going to represent the agent side of the negotiation. And then we have a midterm where we basically stick it to you if you haven't thought it through. We push you we'd rather you fail the midterm and then kill it in the deadline. Then we have a 4-hour block of just pure chaos and madness where everyone's negotiating and you basically have to build your team, and we have a flexible calendar. Your moves have to make sense sequentially if you make moves, but like you can make a move in July, you can make a move that's dated December 15th when that player who was recently signed could be traded,
Right.
or January 15th for those cases, or it could be all the way up to the trade deadline. You got to get your team to 14 rostered players. If you're at 13 like the Warriors were, you have to have an explanation as to why. The Warriors saved a small amount of money by going to 13 and they had a plan to sign a player in 2 weeks, which they did. We're talking about the real Warriors.
Right.
And so if you were the Warriors in our simulation doing the same thing, you would have to have an explanation, sign 2 ways, negotiate extensions with any rookie scale people. And like, we don't know we mentioned Donovan Mitchell, the Cavs. That all may be resolved by when we start our program. We start on July 14th. There'll be a cutoff time where we'll allow real world transactions to impact us. And then there's going to be a point where we cut it off and say, okay, whatever happens in the real world now no longer exists in our timeline. If you watch like, Loki, like we become a branching timeline. And so at that point, whatever, if Donovan Mitchell is traded on July 17th or whatever, and we've passed that cutoff point, it doesn't matter because our Cavs still have Donovan Mitchell and they could do something totally different. And our students are charged with not with doing what they think the team will do. It's what they believe they should do. So it's divorced from, I know that like Daryl Morey operates this way, or Presti with the Thunder operates this way. It's more of how do you think? And so my job has always been make that happen. That's always been my big task. And then the other one that I would say that I've always sort of taken pride in is really getting to know as many students as I can before and after the program and maintain a relationship. I have a Discord. I invite our students to after, not the SBC Discord, but my own private one. I have to vet people first because I do a lot of my work there and a lot of my research there, and I work with a lot of communicate and build relationships with students. So this is all sort of in the umbrella of what I already did. And now I also have to I have to make sure that all the departments execute their vision. Bobby, as our lead instructor, is really sort of the voice of what we're going to teach, who's going to teach it. And of course, the owners of the program are Warren Legary and Albert Hall, who created Summer League in Las Vegas. And so everything has to be consistent with their vision of what the program is. And so I need to answer to them. And so I think fans look at a GM and say, oh, they do whatever they want with the team. And the reality is like, this program is their vision and my job is to execute their vision. I have some, I don't know, whatever authority to execute that, but I'm executing their vision and I'm using, the voice that I have to try to shape it. But ultimately, if I have a great idea that they don't like, it's their program and I need to execute their vision. That's absolutely fair. And that's how the NBA works, right? So when you blame a GM for a terrible transaction, it might not be the GM, it might be the owner, which by the way is worse if you have a team with a bad owner because they're not going anywhere, right? Like the GMs get fired and then the team still stinks. It might be because guy owning the team or the woman or whoever owns the team may not be great at the job. I'm fortunate our owners are, they have a great vision. Bobby is they've charged him with the lead instructor title of decision of what we're going to teach, who's going to teach it, and building it out. And Bobby's been a pleasure to work with. So my job is to basically be the conduit, execute Bobby's vision, execute the owner's vision, get to know all the things that I described, get to know the students, maybe on a deeper level now as the GM, because I'm getting them admitted into the program and all that kind of stuff. It's to improve what, you never want to be complacent or stagnant. So what did we do well last year? What can be improved? What don't we want to lose in terms of the spirit of the program, but what was excess? Not that it was great last year. It was amazing, but everything can be better. And so we freshened it up a bit. I'm excited about what we're going to do. But as far as GM, like, I guess I'm going to have to deal with a lot more of just, the nature of life, which is that things don't work by default. Like, my wife just a second ago before I came up here, like couldn't get the TV thing. I got to work in a second. I'm good at technical stuff like that. There are some things that are a lot harder that take more depth than just, me saying, Alexa, turn on the TV. But I have a magic touch with certain things, right? She's got her magic touch in so many other areas. I'm good at the tech stuff. But it is kind of an example of just like things don't work by nature. There's issues, questions, problems. I don't mean that from a negative. It's just like I have to keep things moving. If we have a speaker and they can't make the time allotted, we're going to have 2 extra sessions of content planned that we'll save for the deep dive in Bobby and I for salary cap. But if we need to fill an hour, we'll have a planned out full hour session ready to go at a moment's notice that we can deliver in case somebody is like, okay, I need to do it at 2:00 instead of 1:00. And now I'm going to have to reschedule everything that we have to make room for Jerry West. I'm not saying Jerry West is doing it. He did the last 2 years. I think it's his birthday today when we're recording this, by the way. And I think I actually have Jerry right there, by the way, and Clyde for the Knicks fans. But that's my job, is to fix whatever it needs fixing, make sure every student is getting what what we promised them. And if somebody wants to do something, I'm not liking this, I want to change my major. Okay, like why don't we move you? I don't know. Like, and then who do I go to when I don't have the answer, and figuring those sort of things out. So that's ownership or other people that I work with and support, and make sure that everybody gets to Vegas, right? Like everybody's getting a hotel room. We provide a hotel. So I have staff they need that information. So I built out systems. I'm pretty decent at coding. So I coded out a few things and just boom, don't have to work that hard. Try to work smarter. I don't own that, because like, I'm sure there's some areas I could be more efficient. So I don't really know what I don't know. That's kind of when people, like I said, when people say I'm an expert at the salary cap, I know that it's unknowable in its entirety. I know that, like, for me to go in and say I know what I'm getting into would be foolish. I've seen it. I worked hand in hand, making sure that the previous GM got everything he needed to execute, but I never wore his shoes. And so I don't know. And I'm excited to find out. I don't expect to sleep a lot. But beyond that, the worst part is that it starts 8 a.m. I'm a late night guy. I like to work until 2, wake up at 10. That's like I set my alarm for 9:30 every day, give or take, unless I have to wake up early. Go to bed around 2, wake up around 10. Like, that's my life, right? I work late, but I got to wake up at 8. We're in front of the students at 8 in the morning. I'm going to be waking up probably around 6:30. Not a fan of that. So if I have one complaint, that's the one. But it's definitely worthwhile, and everyone's getting long, really wonderful days. And the goal is to over deliver what we promise a lot, but we deliver beyond that. And so I'm curious, because like I said, so far so good. But until I get there and I have to actually feel it and have to wrestle with just the entropy of life, and fix whatever needs fixing and make sure we get through it, I'll let you know how it is afterwards. But I'm an optimist, foolishly. So I expect, if I play a game, a video game, whatever, I expect to win, right? Like, I don't know, I expect to succeed. Maybe I'm foolish. And there are times you don't, because no one succeeds every bit of the time. But for whatever reason, the next time I try, I think I'm going to succeed the next time. So I don't know, maybe that's what it takes to succeed, or maybe I'm insane. I don't know. Probably both on some level.
Well, yeah, most definitely. So we've discussed a lot of positions you had in your career. For example, HoopsWorld, your job at the LA Times, Basketball Insiders, NBA TV, Bleacher Report, and now SBC. A lot of these positions over the course of your career, they've overlapped each other. Can you talk a little bit about your experience, like managing more than one position at once?
Well, so like in a perfect world, I guess I have one employer who pays me everything I need to afford 3 daughters and a wife who likes to have things that are reasonable and not extravagant, but like I also want her to have these things, like dates and a vacation every so often, and a nice place to live. And it's expensive. And, my kids are two in college. One's at USC and one's in high school. So one's at CSUN, by the way, Northridge. Matadors, right? Yeah, go Matadors. So I've always sort of just like found a way to make enough money to live by getting it from more than one source, because I've never quite had the single one. Now I did when I had my pre-MBA job, and I could have stayed doing that, which was an event planning company, and I wrote software and managed the business and the finances. Loved it. Didn't love it as much as this. So it got to a point where I had to choose, and so I chose, what I love more. But I literally was working for HoopsWorld, SBC, the LA Times, and my family business event company at the same time. So I had like, there was like an old skit on In Living Color. They had Jamaican characters who had more than one job and were aghast that someone only had one job. And I related to that because, yeah, like I just always managed to have multiple jobs. And so, like, again, like if somebody today was like, here's a dream job, you get to do what you love and we'll pay everything, I'd have to consider it if it was enough money, but again, like I love doing what I do with SBC. I'm happy to be here, and I'm not actively looking to not be doing what I do. I love working with Bleacher Report, same thing. Like I enjoy it. I love consulting with agents all across the spectrum, from those that represent star players, all stars, to those who are just trying to get guys in the league. And I love working in affiliation with the NBPA to help tutor agents to pass the exam, and whatever I do with the NBPA to just help players better understand their own industry. And gosh, I mean, I love doing this sort of thing. And where did I leave out? Let's see. Basketball. Well, I'm no longer Basketball Insider. So Bleacher Report, Sports Business Classroom, consulting. I don't know. I've probably left something out. But that's just, the nature of things. Like that's how I've afforded the life that I have. And it's never 100% easy to juggle multiple bosses or people that I need to answer to. I'm always upfront and honest and straightforward, which to me is just how I operate. And not everyone does in the industry, but buyer beware. It is not always a forthright industry, but yeah, for whatever reason, even when I was like a teenager or whatever, like I've always, for whatever reason, felt that honesty and forthrightness is a better approach for me. I get like not everyone, like when I play poker, which I don't get to play anymore, just don't have enough time. You're not saying, oh, these are my cards. Like there's lies of omission and bluffing, and like there's an aspect to basketball if you're running a team where you can't just tell the person you're negotiating with exactly where you stand. So, but in terms of like saying to Bleacher Report, like, this is when I'll be working for SBC in person, and I really won't be able to write during that time. They know that. I told them the situation. They were comfortable with that. When I was with my family business doing this, I'm like, there are going to be times I'm going to be at events for the game. And so we just had to work around that. And they're like, cool, as long as it doesn't interfere with this. And so there were times I had to sacrifice on the NBA side, times I had to sacrifice on the other side, as long as everyone understood. LA Times, same thing. I'm going to publish salaries for, at the time it was Basketball Insiders. This is not a conflict because you don't want this product. Right now, Bleacher Report, they don't really have the mechanism for me to publish salaries. I'm no longer publishing salaries. Keith Smith with Spotrac does a very good job with that. There are other people who do the same. I don't know where I'm going to be in the future in terms of that. But if there was an opportunity, we'll see. But I just communicate with everybody like, these are my requirements. I'm going to go to All-Star. I'm not going to be around for this period of time. For SBC, if I'm at All-Star on Bleacher Report, and if there's someone with SBC there that we can meet and talk, that's great too. But at a minimum, I'm also cross promoting. And so I've been, fortunate that, Warren and Al are who they are, that my Bleacher Report editors and bosses are who they are, that my LA Times bosses and Basketball Insiders and Hoops World and my pre-NBA career, that everyone was willing to work with that. And, with with it is a conflict with Bleacher in the sense that, like, if I'm consulting an agent on a specific extension, I then tell Bleacher I can't write about this player's situation, and I'm forthright that I'm going to be, and consulting or whatever. I leave it vague, and I don't give away any sort of information that would put my client at risk with Bleacher. But basically, they know there are certain topics I need to avoid
Right.
writing on. We have other writers who can do that, and so it's just a matter of finding what works. And I try to be easy to work with. I try to be communicative, and people seem to, I guess, put up with me or like being around me or whatever. I'm not a people pleaser to the point of detriment, but I generally like try to be cool. And so I think it's reciprocated. And so that's really the heart of it. So, and again, like, if you're just getting started out in this career, you may not have the dream job that pays you everything you want. So you may have to have more than one job. And so you may have to navigate that. And you can't work for two conflicting things and not tell them. Like, so I take a very forthright approach. So I think that's the best I can say as far as the overlap. And it's intentional from a point of view. I don't really look at it this way. It does give security where if one thing went belly up, like LA Times stopped, I still had Basketball Insiders, then immediately got Bleacher Report, but it had the extra security of, like, okay, I still had a place that could get me credentialed. I still had, I had a Jim Buss story that, like, I had just gotten, like, right around the time I got it, like, right after I knew that I was done, but I got a Jim Buss. Jim and I became pretty tight, former head of basketball operations for the Lakers, and got a one-on, like, he would not give interviews to people, and he gave me at least 3. I forget how many stories I did on, 3 or 4. And I had one, and I was like, all right, so I talked to a bunch of different outlets when I hadn't gotten Bleacher yet. And then I was like, I'm just going to publish this at Basketball Insiders. They've been great to me. Long relationship when they were HoopsWorld. So great scoop for them. And then I got Bleacher, like, within a month or two, and it was a lock. So yeah, I guess if anything, flexibility is maybe something that's a takeaway. Trying to say yes. I mean, I'll say this in not that I'm an improv expert or anything. I'll say this at SBC to the class, is that one of the techniques of improv is to yes and something. Someone comes up with a crazy idea in an improv, you don't shut it down and say no but and take it in a different direction. You say yes and you build onto their whatever zany concept that they come up with. You try to add to it, and you don't say no, you build. I've been more of a yes and type of person. You have to set your boundaries and figure out what you're comfortable with. And you can't say yes and to things that you couldn't live with, that you don't believe are morally correct. It's generally speaking, a very positive, good industry, but there's certainly people who are not well-intentioned. And so you have to, set your boundaries. But beyond that, I try to say yes to stuff. And like I said, for me, that's been a positive.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, going back to your point, we're saying sometimes you have to sacrifice something on both ends of, like, each job. I actually experienced that as well in, like, a different light. I'm a student athlete. I just finished my freshman year at Hobart College, and I play basketball over there. So, like, running this podcast and then picking a time to, like, go to practice, then, like, go get your own shots up, then go to lip. So, like, you're sacrificing sometimes on both ends. Like, oh no, I have an interview, so I can't go work out here, or I didn't shoot today. I have to go shoot, and then I can go back and, like, email more people. So I totally understand. I totally understand in that sense. Um,
Some people will tell us we're wrong, and they'll tell us you have to do one thing and do it at the absolute best, 100%. And for some people, that is true.
right,
It's just not true for me. That's all. I
right,
mean, you have to be great at what you do. I give 100% to what I do, but I find a way to fit it all together, right? So I'm not half-assing any of it, but there are times I can't do certain things that I would like to do somewhere, right? Like I was
right.
at the combine, not this year, but last year. And so I think I did miss some of the Lakers think I might have missed a game, like a playoff game or something like that. Like,
Okay.
yeah, like I couldn't do both.
Right.
So whatever, like, or I was doing NBA TV, so I couldn't be at the Lakers for their draft because I was at the draft for NBA TV, right?
Right.
Like there are times you can't be everywhere.
Right.
I think it's viable, but it's not going to be viable for everyone. And those who tell you it's not viable might be right for you. I don't know.
Right.
It's for each individual. So yeah, there might be a time you have to make a more difficult commitment and give something up. Those are life choices that life will present. Hopefully you can delay that for as long as possible and like bridge as much as you can until, especially being relatively young, you don't have to decide until you decide. And that's really how teams operate, by the way, going into
Right.
trade deadlines, free agency, like options and trades. A lot of them don't decide until they need to because you just don't know what the right answer is. And sometimes you just need to let the answer come when it's the right time.
Mm-hmm.
And the natural deadlines of a trade deadline force you to make a decision. So maybe don't make a decision until you have to. So, but those are just generalities, and everyone everyone has their own path. You just sort of got to figure out what that is.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I've been waiting for this part of the interview. What are your predictions for the NBA offseason?
Well, I mean, in general, it's the first year of the new rules. Now, last year were new rules too, but they were transition rules. So this is the first year starting really already after the regular season. We're in a state of there are new rules. It's both harder and easier to make trades,
Right.
depending on where you are in terms of salary. There are greater punishments for teams that are spending more money. So while I don't know the answers to a lot of the questions, I'm really decent at identifying what the questions are. So big questions are Paul George, what he decides to do. The Sixers have more money than pretty much anyone and are looking for someone just like Paul George. And the Clippers clearly aren't paying him what he's asking on some level.
Right.
So what is the answer there? Again, it's harder to predict how it'll, I can more predict what the questions are than the answers. Like, I personally think the Clippers probably pay him a compromise somewhere because like he's from LA-ish, like Palmdale, and like going all the way. I could see it happening. But also I mentioned these new rules, repercussions, they may be like, it's not worth it for us to fully commit to that kind of money and we can win without him. But how do you replace him? I don't know the answer to that because they don't have the means really to replace him. So obviously the Donovan Mitchell thing, I would say it's reasonably likely that one of Mitchell or Garland are gone and that Donovan at some point in the next 3 weeks probably needs to make it clear what he intends to do. Now, he can't technically negotiate until July on an extension. But if I was his advisor, I would get the ball rolling on a relocation if that's the goal ahead of the draft, because those are assets that may be required to make a deal for the Cavaliers. They may need something, maybe it's a pick in this draft or maybe something related to it. So it could wait. I would recommend that it doesn't. And then D'Angelo Russell is like the hinge point on the Lakers in terms of what they do, because if they have 18, 19 million in his salary on the books, if he opts in, that's different than if he opts out. And if he opts out, does he have a suitor that's willing to pay him, or does he need a sign-in trade to get somewhere? Orlando's the other team that has a lot of money. What do they do with their money? I could see them going after Clay, Paul George, D'Angelo, Malik Monk. Those seem to be the most obvious targets. It is a weak free agent class. Not many teams have money. I could see DeRozan sticking with the Bulls and like whatever. So, some aggregators watch something like this, and then the next thing you know, I'm reading like a day later or a few hours later after you post this that like I'm saying that Chris Paul is going to the Lakers, which was like I had an hour and a half long conversation with Jovan Buha of The Athletic We talked about all kinds of things, went through everything, and we came to a conclusion that, like, yeah, it makes a lot of sense that Chris Paul could end up on the Lakers. Was that me coming in hot and heavy saying these things? No. But these are just me looking at the tea leaves and giving some opinion on where some things could go. But like, I don't know what the Wolves are going to do in terms of like their money. Their payroll's ridiculously high for their market and the new rules. But they also have an ownership dispute. I think DeRozan sticks in Chicago. I think the Pistons can't really predict them because they just got Trajan Langdon. So I need to get a sense of what Trajan wants to do with the team. And I don't really have that yet. And they do have more money than most. So they're also pretty lousy. So like, are they spending? I think Markkanen renegotiates his deal and stays in Utah on a similar deal to what Sabonis got in Indiana and Miles Turner got in Miles Turner got in Indiana, Sabonis got in Sacramento.
Right.
Gosh, there's no I mean, I could do hours on this stuff. There's just every team has a story. Like the Grizzlies can't keep their roster together. Well, they can, but they won't keep their exact roster together. So I think Kennard is probably traded or opted out. Why opt him out if you can opt him in and trade him? Or does it, and it would probably be to a team that can't afford him without the trade. So he's a good shooter, not a great defender, but can probably help a team that needs shooting who doesn't need shooting. He's one of the best catch and shoot guys in the league. So like each team has a story and they don't know the answers yet because we don't know what, like each thing bleeds into each thing. Like what the Sixers do they get Paul George? If they do, that answers a huge question.
Right.
The Clippers don't have money to replace him. So that sort of, okay, 40, almost, let's call it 50 million of the Sixers money went to Paul George. Well, that's their money. So now like I can plug in who else gets their money, but that's a big answer. Does Orlando pay Clay? They pay D'Angelo, Malik, right? Like the Kings can't pay Malik Monk that much based on the situation. Do the Magic overpay? What do the Spurs do? They have a little bit of money. What do the Thunder do? They have a little bit of money. So I'm leaving out a team or two, like Charlotte. They're
Trae Young situation in Atlanta. Does he get traded?
I don't know the market for Trae. Right now, the market is pretty. I don't know a lot of teams that are fans of the combination of player and contract,
right,
and price to get him. He's not very tall. He's not very hefty. He needs the ball in his hands.
The defensive end, he's not that well. Hasn't been doing that well either.
And he doesn't play well off the ball. So you're basically getting someone who's your offense has to be heliocentric around Trae. And is he good enough to win at the highest level? Are you good enough to win with him as your best player? And the answer might be yes in a Allen Iverson sort of way, which was Allen Iverson was similar player in terms of build and probably similar in efficiency, where like neither is the most efficient scorer, but like when they get going, they can get a lot of points for themselves and for others. Both incredible talents. Iverson was well loved by his teammates. Trae doesn't necessarily have the same reputation. I can't speak to that, but they're not the greatest intel on Trae as far as how things have gone in Atlanta. It might be situational. And some team may gamble that it is, but I don't know. And so if they can't trade Trae and they can't find someone to take him, he's not somebody you would pay to get off your books. It's too expensive. You're not going to send him to like Charlotte and like pay him to give up picks to get out of him. Then maybe they look to move DeJounte, but like I think their goal is to keep DeJounte, keep Jalen Johnson, probably Okongwu, and build around like that younger group. They also have a really high pick, right? Number 1 pick. So how does that fit into it? I don't think they'll trade it personally. I think they'll take it, add to that mix, try to go a little younger, try to get out of a little bit of money because their rosters, a team gets like to the conference finals and they sometimes overinvest because they think they're at that level.
Right.
I think that's what happened with Atlanta. They weren't there yet. And, like Indiana, are they there yet? Because they got as far as they got. Should they just shell out and like go for it with just giving out crazy money to everybody there? Pay Obi Toppin a ton, pay like Pascal. You should pay Pascal a lot. But like as you go through the list, they have to also be careful because they're not all the way there yet. And you don't want to overinvest where like the
Exactly.
Hawks were like, okay, this is our team. This is who we are. We can win with this group. We're going to pay everyone we have, John Collins, everybody. And we're going to win with this group because we're Eastern Conference finalist.
Right.
That didn't happen as far as performance. They had over invested in a blip in, you needed to see consistent success, which is why the Thunder will be delicate in how they approach.
Right.
Because yes, they're at a certain level, but they can only go so far in commitment, especially same with Magic, where like you need to pay Paolo and you need to pay Jalen Williams and Chet on the OKC side. You need to pay Wagner and maybe Giddey and maybe, I'm trying to think of all the different names. Like decisions have to be made soon on all these young players. So as you invest, you just have to be careful not to overinvest. Sort of stuff that we try to teach our students for the mock deadline to think through their actions beyond just like go get stars, because most stars that you can get are available for a reason, and it's more of a
role
name.
players at the end of the day, I feel like
I
guys.
mean, you can't win without elite talent.
Exactly.
Like Jalen, Jalen Brown and Tatum,
Right.
Halliburton, Siakam, Kyrie, Luka, I guess Edwards, Cat, and Gobert in some function, and obviously Jaden McDaniels is a high-paid role player. But like, those are the guys who are left. Some of those are like top-tier offensive talents, and it's really hard to win without them. But if you just put like Beal and KD and Booker together, just because is Booker a better scorer than like almost anyone in the league? Yes. Is KD a better scorer than almost anyone in the league? And then when healthy, is Beal one of the better scorers? Maybe a B plus.
There's only like one
level.
ball to go around though. And then they didn't really have they also didn't have like a point guard per se to get them into their offense. I feel like Booker's not really a point guard. He's like a guy that's going to get downhill, get into his mid-range game, and then like score first mentality. And then that kind of like diminishes Bradley Beal because he's like kind of like a similar player, I feel like. So he's like the third option, kind of like guy like catch and shoot in the corner, because then at that same time Kevin Durant needs to get going with his face.
So what are you paying for at that point? Like you're overpaying for somebody to be a catch and shoot off-ball scorer when they need to be an on-ball scorer, and he doesn't make up for it on defense enough, where it's like Chris Bosh was an incredible scorer in Toronto, and he became an incredible defender, role player, and he took a smaller role, and that's why it worked in Miami, right? Wade and LeBron were the offensive firepower. Someone had to take a back seat. Kevin Love took a similarly kind of step back of Cleveland, I was this top scorer in the NBA type guy in Minnesota. I'll be a secondary or tertiary guy in Cleveland. And so when you just put a bunch of scores together, it doesn't always work. And so that's where you just have to be really diligent in team composition and getting the most out of the money that you invest, not because an owner's cheap or because they don't want to pay tax, but because the rules are punishing for teams the more you spend. The league wants some level of parity on different levels, financial parity, so that you're not obligated to lose money as a franchise just to be in the NBA, and then competitive parity so that you can be. The Bucks could win a title in the last 5 years. The Pacers, one of the lowest payroll teams in the league, is in the conference finals against the Celtics, who are one of the highest. That's the league. That's the system working. Dallas, Minnesota, I think Minnesota might be under the tax. I think Dallas is under the tax. I know Boston is in, and Indiana, I believe, and I don't like to go off of memory, but I believe we have 3 of the 4 final teams aren't even taxpayers. So now next year, Minnesota, all their money kicks in, and they will be. Right. And Indiana has Halliburton's money kicking in next year, so they won't be a tax team next year. Payroll gets higher. Mavs, I know they were. I'd have to look at them. They were under the cap this year to make their moves, and so maybe over time with the Gafford and the whatever, their moves, that things start to get that direction. But my point is that it's not just buying your way to a title in the NBA. Right. And if Boston wins, you say, well, they're the only team that of those 4 that was like the highest paid payroll. Well, that's part of it, but also they've been this on the verge team for several years that has made those steps to finally get over the hump and win it all if they do. So, and they can't even stay at that high level for that long. So they're going to have to face some decisions too.
Right.
How long can they stay at this high level? So if you want your team to win, you have to make good decisions based on basketball, which is why you need good scouts, good people to break down the analytics and the basketball of what you're doing. You need to understand the cap and understand the trajectory of the market and where the money is going and how you can improve creatively. And we teach both those majors at sports business classrooms. So that's really where my focus is to try to, get people to understand how hard it is to do this job. And when you're in this mock deadline, you see like, wow, we want to do all these things. Our menu of choices is pretty crappy compared to what we wanted to do.
Right.
We're now taking the best of a list of choices that we don't like. But that's kind of the NBA, and that's kind of what the trade deadline is. You're not a fan will come up with a menu of like, we want our team to do this, that, and the other thing. Reality sets in, and the team is like looking at a bunch of crappy choices, and it's like, well, you're the Wizards. We could trade Tyus Jones for second-round picks and a player we don't want, or we could just say like, all right, you know what? We'll finish out the season with Tyus Jones. We'll try to sign and trade him in the summer. Maybe that works out. Maybe they don't. But they viewed that potential of a sign and trade better than the quote crap that they were getting at the deadline, right? So that's the kind of, that's unfortunately, for teams, it's like, yeah. And so if you're going to make your moves, you might be better off making it in the off season. But then the Mavs and the Pacers and then last year's Lakers sort of showed that if you're on the verge, you can potentially get to the conference finals by making the right deadline moves. So do teams then say, okay, we'll just put ourselves in a position to make moves at the deadline and have faith that'll happen when usually it doesn't? So it's a tough one. There's no easy way to get to this level. It's why it's so hard to win a championship, because even when you do make all the right moves and you're there, and then Kawhi Leonard or whatever is hurt, or Tyrese has a hamstring problem, or whatever, like Jalen Brunson gets hurt, there's so many details and it's so hard to win that, you learn more respect for those in these positions once you do the homework. Once you try to put yourself in their shoes, I think you should have a better respect for how hard this is. And you start to lose the fan brain of like, they're idiots, they suck, why don't they do this? They're cheap, they don't know what they're doing. It's like, well, they may be great at what they're doing, may have had a great idea, and the owner said, I don't like it. And it doesn't even matter that they want to do the right thing. And you're hating on some GM for doing a crappy job when like they saw the train coming, nothing they can do about it. They couldn't get maybe it's their failing that they couldn't convince their owner, the team's owner, the governor.
Right.
Or maybe, maybe the governor is impossible and irrational and doesn't know anything about basketball and is just a billionaire who is, I don't want to stereotype, but there are some who are just billionaires who don't know what they're doing and think they do. And some are great. Some of the owners in this league are great. They have a lot of money, but they understand people better and they understand how to manage people better. I don't know where your favorite, not you individually, but the viewers, listeners' favorite team, where they fall on the spectrum, but it is a hard job. And I'm not, look, they all get paid well, the GMs. Frank Vogel's the winner here, right? Like he just got fired. He's got like 4 more years, I think, of paid money to not coach the Suns. When you just establish why their roster doesn't work, it's not coaching, right? I mean, maybe you could have done something differently. I don't know. But like the team didn't make sense on paper. What does make sense on paper is that he's getting paid for 4 years not to coach. Ego-wise, I'm sure he'd rather coach. But at the same time, good for him.
Do you think Kevin Durant leaves?
I mean, he's under contract. How does he leave?
I don't know. Request another trade. I don't know if that's realistic or not.
They don't have to trade him.
That's true.
Now, it's when a guy gets closer to the end of his contract that you have to start to consider that.
The Nets traded him when he had opted in for like that huge contract that I remember last year.
Right. And they basically said, no, we're not trading you. And they held him for a long period of time and eventually traded him. But like, same with Kyrie. Like they tried to trade Kyrie, then they didn't, and they sat on it, and then they traded him. So like, excuse me, you don't have to listen, but
Right.
there's a point where when they get to the end of their contract where like the Cavs will lose Donovan Mitchell for nothing. They gave up too much. They can't really replace him. They're not a free agent destination. They're probably not going to have cap room with the Mobleys and Garlands and
Yeah.
Allens and other players. So like they can't afford to lose him if he decides to play that game. Whereas somebody who's got multiple years, you have a little bit more say. So I would need intel that says KD is going to go that route, and then I
Right.
start to break it down. But until I have some level of intel, I sort of, yeah, I mean, anyone could ask, you could say that of anybody in any team. Like, what if they ask out? But until I start to get intel, I don't dig in.
Yeah.
Whereas I start to look at when players' contracts start to come up.
Right.
Now the team has to reinvest. Are they going to? Or is the player going to reject those overtures? And now a decision has to be made before the end of the contract. Are they going to just let the player walk, or do they want to get value for the player? And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. My job is to sort of map out at least what the conversations are.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, it should be like a really interesting summer coming up. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Eric. And I'm really looking forward to Sports Business Classroom this summer.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. I'm looking forward to getting to know you in person, and we'll try to help you find the best path forward for whatever it is you want to do.
Thanks for listening to Gen Z Hoops. Make sure to follow, like, and subscribe on Instagram, LinkedIn, and all major social media platforms at Gen Z Hoops. You can tune in and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and every other podcast platform on the planet. Get ready for the next episode.